I will now pause your video using my mind. And now it is on pause. We can begin. Extrasensory perception, or ESP, has been the topic of psychological research for decades. It isn't really done so much anymore, and by so much I mean at all. Nobody takes it seriously. But when we did do the research in this area, what we were researching was the ability to perceive events in ways that cannot be explained by the known capacities of our senses. So that's what extrasensory perception is all about. Now, the field of research that looked into ESP was parapsychology. So parapsychology, that's the study of extrasensory perception and other kinds of psi phenomena. Those are these events that seem to defy the accepted scientific laws. So nowadays, like I said, we don't really take this seriously. Nobody's really doing parapsychological research nowadays, except for a few, specific researchers that are being funded by private institutions, and most of the time these institutions, they have a kind of a bias towards some of these beliefs. But due to the lack of any real scientific findings, parapsychology kind of dried up and was abandoned in the 1980s. But, like I said, we used to take it seriously. So this was a serious topic of research in psychology for many decades. We've looked at many different kinds of abilities, like clairvoyance, the ability to perceive distant or hidden events. Telepathy, the ability to read minds and communicate using your mind. Precognition, the ability to predict the future. Psychokinesis, the ability to influence inanimate objects using sheer willpower. Near-death experiences, so when you have that sense of like a detachment and when you feel like you're moving on into another world. Reincarnation, when you seem to be able to retrieve memories from a previous lifetime. And apparitional experiences, like when you see ghosts or something else, just seeing something in an immaterial form. So here's one of the basic techniques that we've used to test people who claim to have these abilities. These are called Zener Cards. It's a deck of 25 cards, and each card has one of 5 symbols. So we can use these cards to test for a wide range of different kinds of paranormal abilities. In the traditional form, when I would actually sit in a room with the supposed, psychic or whatever, what I would do is I would hold up the card and look at it. Now, if you could read my mind, you would know what I'm looking at, and then you could accurately guess the result. But we can't really do that through this video. However, we can test to see if you have the ability to predict the future. So I'm about to show you what's on these cards, and if you can accurately predict the future, you should know what you're going to see before you see it. So what do you think is behind card number 1? Did you guess a star? If you did, maybe you have some ability. But let's do a few more just to confirm your ability. What's behind the second card? Did you guess a square? Now here's the third one. This is some wavy lines. And the fourth one, a plus sign or a cross. And then lastly, a circle. So how many did you get right? Did you get any of them right? If you got many of them right, then you should talk to me, because I would really like to get to know you and learn more about your apparent ability. But like I said, we've never really found anybody with such abilities. All these studies we've done in the past, all this research that's been done, though we did initially find some promising kind of results, later on we realized that this was largely due to trickery and deception. So many people who claimed to have various kinds of ESP were later exposed as being frauds. So I have a video regarding this kind of, apparent evidence, apparent belief, but later, exposure as being fraudulent. I have an example of this in the video that I have in the comments. So this is about Uri Geller. If you've never heard of Uri Geller, it's probably because he was really famous before your time. But it's definitely a really good example of this kind of trickery and deception. When we look back at all the different ESP experiments that were done in like the 60s and the 70s and such, what we see is that in general they weren't very well designed. A lot of those early kind of positive instances of people with ESP may have simply been due to chance. In other words, it's like a run of luck. It's when a statistically unusual outcome occurs by chance alone. What I mean is just like let's say you have a 100-sided die. These things do exist. But if you have a 100-sided die, it's very unlikely that you'll be able to predict the outcome of that die because there's 100 different ways that die could roll. But if you keep guessing, if you keep trying over and over and over and over and over and over, eventually you're going to get it right simply due to chance. Now, when you finally do get it right, then you'll be able to say, I accurately predicted the future. And you'll be correct. You did accurately predict the future. But what you're not really thinking about is all the times you were wrong. And this kind of goes back to when I was talking about confirmation bias. We tend to notice things that we want, and we don't notice things that don't really fit our expectations. So you may have experienced this in your own life where you make some prediction and it comes true, and that might seem kind of spooky. But the thing that you're not realizing is that you've made hundreds, if not thousands, of similar predictions that did not come true. So if you take all of those predictions into account, then it's pretty obvious that you probably don't have any kind of paranormal abilities. In fact, no one claiming to have such abilities has ever passed rigorous scientific testing. So what I'm saying is, just be skeptical. If it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Now, a lot of people still really argue, and they still really claim, and they try to become famous by, claiming to have these abilities. So, thankfully, we have somebody out there, we have an organization that is dedicated towards testing these kinds of individuals. It's called the James Randi Educational Foundation, or the JREF. Now, we've talked a little bit about James Randi before. I've included a few links to some of his videos. But the whole point of this foundation is to test people, to try to scientifically test people who claim to be able to do anything that's paranormal. And the way they do this is they actually offer a $1 million prize to anybody that can prove they have any ability. It doesn't matter how mundane that ability is. I mean, if you think you have a really mundane ability, like the ability to predict the color of your English teacher's socks, well, that could win you $1 million if you can prove it. So if you can prove it using the scientific method, you could become rich, and I want a cut of that. I expect to get a finder's fee of at least 10% because, I told you about the prize. So I've included a link to this, to James Randi just talking about this, prize, in case you're interested.